I'm Claire Butterfield, the Program Director at the Illinois Science and Energy Innovation Foundation, or ISEIF. As with other items in our series, this conversation is focused on an unanswered question. What will we tell the children? STEM education can be a key tool for preparing young people for emerging energy issues. How will it empower a diverse crop of future innovators to deal with complex issues like energy and the future? Our featured guest today is Krista Moroder, Professional Manager at Digital Promise. Digital Promise is a nonprofit organization working to improve learning opportunities for all Americans through technology and research. Our featured grantee representatives today are Willie Hunter and Lindsay Longstreth from Illinois State University, which has developed and implemented a curriculum called Smart Grid for Schools. This includes an interactive mobile classroom that allows students to get a hands-on in how the electric grid works. Willie is an expert in science education, while Lindsay has been sharing the mobile display with schools across the state. ISEIF just released a report on the Smart Grid for Schools curriculum, and you can find that in a link on the news section of our website. Thank you for joining us. So to start with, Krista, for those who aren't familiar with Digital Promise, what are the organization's overarching goals? What's the vision for the future at the level of both the individual classroom and the larger school system?
Yeah, so Digital Promise was started a few years ago. It was part of the Higher Education Act of 2008, so it was signed into law by the Bush administration and then launched under the Obama administration. And so we're a NGO nonprofit, and so the big goal is to spur innovation in education. And so what that essentially means is we're trying to meet those critical points of mass that aren't currently being met either through government initiatives or through current nonprofits. And so where we're trying to focus a lot of our efforts is sort of at the intersection of educators, developers, and research. So a prime example is yesterday we held a research summit that brought those three groups together so we could talk about better ways to use technology to advance learning, to build better products, and to get research into classrooms in a more efficient and effective way. So I guess that's it. Big goal is, you know, it'd be great if every kid had always available access to the internet. So how can we do that, and how can we leverage that best for learning?
And so, Lindsay, what's different about Smart Grid for Schools? What's the experience for students as opposed to a typical classroom environment?
Well, Smart Grid for Schools, like you said, are mobile interactive learning modules, and so the students experience a hands-on approach to learning. It's the curriculum is constructivist-based, so when the students come up and start interacting with the displays, they're encouraged to touch and explore. We give them procedures somewhat to follow to gain the learning that we're going for, but they're not exactly told you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and then you have to do that in order to get the outcome. They have to do a little bit of problem solving, they have to use teamwork, and most of all, it's very hands-on. There's lots of buttons and switches as well as the software for them to get the data from. So it's not like a typical classroom setting where you've got the teacher standing up with a chalkboard or anything. They're standing at these stations, and they're working in groups, and they have their curriculum, and they're going around flipping switches and hitting buttons and looking at the screen to learn about the appliances or whatever it is that whatever the station is teaching them. So.
Thank you. Willie, what is the Smart Grid for Schools curriculum meant to accomplish? What makes it an effective vehicle for teaching the next generation about energy?
I think there are two parts to it. One is you have to begin where the students are at and realize where the shortcomings in their education and their knowledge are. For instance, for a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or an 18-year-old, and sometimes for adults, electricity is something that appears mysteriously in an outlet in a wall, and there's no reason for them to think of have experienced that it must have come from somewhere before that. So one part of what we have are the grid tables, which simulate and demonstrate the production of electricity from generation stations through distribution and transmission lines all the way to individual apartment buildings and individual farms and homes and that sort of thing. The generating stations that the students experience are hand crank generators, and so in order for the lights to light up in those various buildings, the students have to crank the generators on the grid tables, and they have to correctly wire the distribution system, and so the students get a chance to experience and see that electricity is produced by a spinning magnet inside a coil of wire, that it doesn't do anything unless it's wired correctly to the transmission towers and to the buildings, and but when they do that, they can see that it lights up. So one of the things that it does is they get a chance to experience where the electricity comes from prior to it arriving in their own outlet or in their own light switch at their own home. So that's one piece. The second piece that it's really useful for is that in the rooms, in the simulated houses that are 6 feet high and 18 feet, the students are able to swap those appliances in and out for ones that use less electricity or ones that use more electricity, and they're able to see that that different appliances use different amounts of electricity, because that is transparent to or well, maybe I should say it's opaque to users unless they're actually the ones paying the bills. That a hairdryer uses a different amount of electricity than a refrigerator. The size of the plug that you put in the wall looks exactly the same. Why would it use a different amount of electricity? So it's giving students the opportunities to see how electricity is generated and giving them the opportunities to see that different appliances and working for different lengths of time use different amounts of electricity.
Thanks. And you are breaking a little here and there, Willie. I am imagining you have a grad student in the van with you who is now operating a hand crank generator, and that's how you're talking to us. So if you ever know that you've broken up and would like to repeat yourself, go ahead, because we can edit this.
Okay.
So is there a grad student operating a hand crank generator in the van right now?
Actually, no, my wife is operating the hand crank generator in the van right now.
That is very gracious of her. Please thank her for us. So I know you were all asked if you had some questions for, some questions for each other, and so now's the time. What did you want to ask each other?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit about, may I go first?
Go, yes, go ahead, go
okay. First. I'd like to know a little bit about some of the most important successes that Digital Promise has had over, let's say, the last 2 or 3 years. What are the things that they can point to and say, you know what, we accomplished this, or we contributed to this, or this thing. It might have happened without us, but it happened better. It happened faster.
Yeah.
Tell us some of those things, Krista.
Well, so I'd say my favorite are 2 initiatives. So the first one is the one we started with, which is the League of Innovative Schools, and it brings about 50 superintendents from school districts all over the U.S. together, and they meet regularly, and they work on things, and they share their best practices. And I don't know of a lot of organizations that have really done that to that degree, where they sit around and talk about their lessons learned together. And so we've got, the superintendent of West Ada School District with Knox County, with Vista in San Diego, and they're really sharing things. So that's, I think, a big deal, that, everyone's trying to recreate the wheel in their own districts, and it's kind of ridiculous. We need to just work together a little more.
Yeah. What are some of the things that what are some of the things that they've done that are really kind of make them feel like, hey, we're being innovative?
Actually, for that, I'd probably switch to my initiative because I know it a little better.
Okay, fair enough.
So mine is called Digital Promise Schools, and it's very similar in the sense that we're trying to network a group of districts. And so we have 21 schools across the U.S. In 10 or 11 different districts. And it's funded through a partnership with the Verizon Foundation. And so every single kid and teacher in these 21 schools, middle schools, receives a tablet with data access. And so when they leave school, they still have access to the internet, and for a lot of these kids, this is the first time internet has entered their home. And so we're working with them to do the whole start to finish 2 years of here's everything to prepare for rollout, now you're doing your rollout, now you're working with parents, and now professional learning. And so there's a full-time coach in each school, a full-time storyteller, and we're at the point now with our first group, they've been a year with us already, and they're just starting to get past that substitution level where, yes, they're being more efficient, but now how do we talk about changing practices?
Right.
So that's really neat to see because, you know, when I was a director of technology, I was so focused on doing this for my one district, but I didn't have the perspective of 20 schools.
Right.
Yeah. Krista, is your work focused on STEM education?
Yeah, so part of one of the big overarching goals of the grant is to increase interest in STEM careers and just in activities. And so a lot of the work that the coaches have been doing with the teachers has been focused on how do we make STEM not just, you know, science class, math class, but how do we give bigger challenges that incorporate everything together. And so we talk about it a lot as STEAM, adding the art in or adding English in, but really any challenge can be solved in some way with technology. And so how do we make that bigger picture of just solving challenges and giving kids the tools they need and the confidence they need to do that?
Yeah. So what are some of the metrics that you use to say, hey, in this case we've been really successful, and in this case we've maybe not been so successful?
Yeah, so metrics are fun. We have an outside organization that's been working with us for our evaluation, but we also have an internal team. And one of my favorite things that they've been doing are, we call them fast facts, but every single kid takes a 2-click survey every single week. Yeah. And so it's become this competition against each other where the kids who answer the most, so they might have 80% participation versus 60%, have sort of their small party.
Right.
And so it's nice to get that continuous data over time. How accurate that is, I'm not sure, but you know, middle school kids are pretty honest, so they'll tell you what they're thinking.
That's true.
Yeah. For us, we have a really good idea of how many students we're interacting with, and we have and we know precisely how many teachers we're interacting with, and we have a good sense of the positive experience they have during those times. But what we really don't know is what the students do when they go home and talk to the decision makers in their homes, which is in most cases their parents, but not exclusively. And so I think we've got a really good handle on the first set of metrics, but not very good handle on what really happens after that. Mm-hmm. And we don't count on them having digital access. So it's nice if they can take a survey somewhere else, which we provided for them, but we don't really know how many of them have easy digital access outside of the classroom setting. Mm-hmm. So at that point, we lose contact with them.
Yeah, we've, not to butt in, Willie, but we've found that the teachers are really willing to hand out the surveys and even, you know, call them extra credit for the students to bring them back signed, and or they'll say, oh, we'll take them to the computer lab to do the surveys. You know, the teachers are really wanting to support this metric, but they have to see the power bill. They have to talk to their parents. They have to go outside their house and see if they have a smart meter or not. So there's some elements in the survey that we're looking for that will, you know, engage that conversation with their parents. But again, like Willie said, we're kind of stuck right there. It's like, how do we get them to take the survey and have the information that we require, like looking at their power bill, looking at their energy consumption, looking at their meter, but still make sure that they have access to the internet to do that survey. So, especially
since what we would like them to be doing is to be having a meaningful conversation with their families, right? Yeah. And so we hope that our survey can help stimulate that conversation, but we don't really know how great a job we're doing at that.
Willie, how do you see curriculum as a whole putting your views of good STEM education into practice?
I think we're doing an awesome job in the nicest possible way, in that the types of prompts that we're providing to students, the relative importance to their actual lives is really very high. So all the things that are in my mind that are really good about STEM, when STEM education, when any education is doing things that are valuable, the students are active, they're engaged with something that is of meaning to them, and they're engaged at a level that is at the level they're at. And so our curriculum is very, very good on all of those scales. The only place that it's not probably so good is that there are very few second graders or sixth graders or 10th grade students who actually care about how big their power bill is. So in that sense, it's not the idea of energy and electricity usage only matters in a theoretical sense, and it doesn't matter to them in terms of, hey, I could save some money, I could use a lot less of the world's resources, and that's the only area of that is not really just super duper fabulous. What do you think about that, Lindsay? Do you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that. When I started traveling with the displays, I noticed right away that they really liked how colorful the displays were. They liked that everything was full size in the rooms. They could walk up and touch a stove and touch the refrigerator and the microwave, and they could see a bathtub. So they really liked that everything was real life. It looked like a house they could live in. But they were kind of like, after they started playing, learning with it, they would go, well, why do I care? You know, what does this mean to me? And so as I started to travel, I started to create dialogue that I would say at the beginning, at the end of the displays, or end of their sessions, and I would say, do your parents ever fuss at you and say, turn off the lights? And it's like, you know, probably about 85–90% participation. Oh yeah, my parents always tell me to turn off the lights. And I would say, well, now do you know why? And they're like, oh, okay. Have you ever gone shopping at Lowe's or Home Depot, and have you seen these yellow energy guide tags? I go, oh yeah. I said, well, now you can help your parents pick out better appliances. Which ones would you choose? And so I started to create questions that would tie back into, well, one day do you want to live with your parents the rest of your life? Do you want to go get a job and get your own place? And they would say, I say, well, now that's something you need to pay attention to. You can always buy the off-brand macaroni and cheese to save money, but you always have to pay your power bill. It's one of those things that you need to do in life. And you could see the wheels turn. But again, that still required me being there to make those prompts and to have that discussion. Me not taking the place of the teacher, because the teacher obviously has meaningful discussions after we leave, and some of them have their students do home energy audits and things like that. But I would definitely agree with Willie where it's really colorful. They're really colorful displays. They learn about the energy efficiency of different appliances. They gain understanding of the magic of creating electricity with these hand cranks. But there's still that disconnect. Why do I care? So I think we're doing a great job, but there's definitely some improvements to be made.
So I wonder if I can put the three of you into a conversation. There's something that I've wondered about, because I've seen the displays and I've seen video of kids interacting with them, and clearly they love that these things are big and real and they can touch them and push buttons and interact with them. But Krista, your work is focused on augmenting learning with access to the internet, to the digital world, and it seems like there's maybe a difference in approach here, or an opportunity for additional enrichment. And I'm so Willie and Lindsay, you did not choose to add some kind of a digital enhancement or to deliver information over the internet as part of this curriculum. Talk to Krista about that. Everyone, please.
Yeah, and actually, maybe I'll jump in before we start. Our goal isn't necessarily to, throw technology at kids. It's more just to make sure that they have access to the same tools that we do as adults. I mean, and when we learn in our real lives, we demand access to the internet. It's just become a way of how we learn. We select a challenge, we Google it, we look it up on YouTube, and then we solve it. We connect to people. And so there's a lot of approaches, and I think the best is always, what makes it most relevant for kids and what makes it the most real, so it doesn't feel like some thing where you're going in and now I've been taught and now I'm going to take my tests. Like, how do we make learning real? And so the main goal is just to give kids access to the same tools. So honestly, to walk into a house that is a smart grid or to build a smart grid house, that's what would probably engage me the most as a student. I would love to learn how to build a house, so I'm not sure if that's helpful at all.
Yeah. One of the places that we are ahead of the times is that the smart appliances promise feels like it's out there, but it may not become a really accessible part of our lives. I don't know whether it'll be another 5 years or 10 years, but so one of the places that we could do something, but we do not, I personally don't have, but we don't have the capability of, is to really show the students and their families how will their lives change in ways that are powerful to them when we have smart appliances and when we take whatever that next step is. The way that we're going right now is we're still just building the surrounding infrastructure of smart meters and wireless routers communicating back and forth between the utilities and the neighborhoods and the individual homes and customers. But that will probably only have minimal obviousness to students. When we get to the point of having smart appliances that they can manage their electricity and their energy consumption more individually, which I assume is coming, if we had those in place now, then those types of internet access and digital skills that Digital Promise may be promoting would be more meaningful in conjunction with what we're doing right now. That's kind of, it's that next step of what Krista's going to pull off in the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years. That's where we could have that confluence of.
Well, it goes back to, I think it goes back to what you were saying before, where, it'd be great if we had access at home, and we knew that there was access at home, and we knew that kids could talk to their parents at home. Until we have that access, we don't know what we're missing out on. As a teacher, we always go back to that. A CART model is not really effective, because if you say, I'm going to have paper and pen on Tuesday and Thursday, and half the paper might be missing and half the pencils are broken, that's not an effective tool. And so it's hard to think about that as a full approach until we get full access for everyone.
Lindsay, you've been out in the field. What is your sense of the percentage of kids who do have that access at home? Could you hazard a guess?
Oh my gosh.
How many kids have a smartphone?
That I don't know, because most schools you go to, if it's high school, you can see them. They're allowed to have their phones, but middle school and elementary, the students aren't allowed to have phones on them. So I couldn't give you that answer because I don't see them. They're not. They have to have them locked up in their locker. I would probably say, over half. Probably like 75%.
I was talking to a 5th grade teacher yesterday in reasonably affluent, but kind of middle class Wilmington normal, and they said 50% of their students have a smartphone.
Yeah.
In 5th grade, so what's that? That's age 10 or 11.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Well, I was saying about access at home. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the other thing is they might have it, but you said they lock it in their locker. I'm going to be honest, the world's collective knowledge, and I'm putting it away. There's a difference between having it and leveraging it for learning. I think in schools we often think, oh, this is a toy, this is entertainment, because maybe that's how we use our smartphones. But when I'm outside, I cannot navigate anywhere without my GPS. I Google constantly. And so how do we get people to shift their thinking about what technology is and what it can do?
So I had a question about that for you, Krista, because I am analog and kind of old school, and I believe that part of what kids learn is this very self-directed learning because they're curious about something, and I think that using digital material is great for that. But the part that I wonder about is serendipity, the things they don't know about, so they're not curious about them because they don't know they exist. When I was a wee lass, that was all curated into the encyclopedia. So you hit parrots on your way to Pullman, and you learn some mind-blowing thing about a parrot. But the internet is so big. How does serendipity happen in a way that's not dangerous for kids, that's not overwhelming? As a person who works in digital instruction, how do you manage that?
I think the main thing that we stress is, whatever it is, whether it's digital, analog, technology is constantly changing. It's behavior is behavior. A kid can draw a dirty picture using paper and pencil, and then they can, post an inappropriate picture on the internet. The difference is one will have a much larger audience. And so ultimately the root is, how do we raise kids who make good choices and make smart decisions and try to make the world a better place? I think the thing is, it's here, and it's here when they go home in a lot of cases, but we're ignoring it in schools. And if there was a way to make school more real and make it reflect the real world more, I think we'd be doing kids an advantage when it comes to learning. And, and with the serendipity piece, have you ever been on Wikipedia? Every time I go to Wikipedia, I click this button and then this button, and then I end up on the Ellen DeGeneres channel of YouTube. I don't even know what happens.
And all those other YouTube hits that are further down the page, right? That's the serendipity piece. And much on my Facebook newsfeed, right?
Yeah.
But other people that I probably don't need to know that much about provide for me, right?
Exactly.
My Facebook newsfeed dwells in the land of perpetual outrage, so I'm trying to find other ways of serendipity to happen. So Willie, let's hang out in the abstract a little bit longer. You have a view on the state of science education, which relies, I guess, on the overall trustworthiness of facts. In a world which is increasingly virtual and where things of unequal value appear equally valuable. So how do you navigate that?
I guess I don't see it as being that different, in the sense that we've always had a system in place where we gave more credibility to people and organizations that, in our opinions, merited more credibility to those that do not. And one of the very abundant 21st century skills is figuring out which things that you get digitally have credibility and which things do not. And in that sense, the credibility in the brand matters, and as we recognize that as digital producers, but also as digital consumers, we will be protective of those brands. But I don't see that as being any different than when I stubbed my toe or scratched my knee as a kid. I went to I went through a hierarchy of, okay, can I wipe it off and get on with it? Do I need, does it hurt so much that the person that I'm playing with helps me with it? Do I go and see my mother? Do I go and see my doctor? I mean, I worked through various kind of hierarchies of perceived need and credibility to solve that particular problem. And I think it's the same, that there are some things that I find Wikipedia very useful for, because the knowledge that I have in some domains tells me, oh yes, this seems reasonable and it makes sense. But there are other domains in which I don't have that kind of personal knowledge, and I say, well, Wikipedia was good at this level, but I wouldn't want to stake my life on it. WebMD is one notch more credible and one notch more sophisticated, and so I give that one much more credibility. So I don't really see it being that much different. It's just a modern way of being a discerning consumer, and that's the skill that we have had to teach in the past, one way or the other, and it's a skill that we will have to continue to teach and experience.
Willie was talking about that this is just a matter of navigating a hierarchy of resources and knowing that you have to just keep moving your way up the chain, and that they have trustworthiness based on your experience. How do you see young people showing you that they know how to do that?
I haven't had to do that really very much with Smart Grid, because we don't require them to be on the internet for any of this. We don't require them to do any web-based research. So they're really just working with me with our displays and with our curriculum.
They don't think you're lying to them.
No.
Why do they not
They
think
trust
you're lying?
all your resources.
I'm the Smart Grid lady. Why wouldn't you believe me?
I mean, you're given credibility by the teachers that have invited you into the classroom.
Yeah, I would say that. I'm like a traveling science museum. I'm an exhibit that comes to their school, and so they trust that if this lady brought these 6-foot-tall giant displays, she must know what she's talking about.
Yeah. Well, and this teacher invited her, so that's one notch, right?
Right. Yeah. I really can't give you an answer much past that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. How about you, Krista? How do you see the kids showing that they do know that there's a hierarchy, that some things are true out there and some things aren't?
I think it goes back to what Willie was saying. I mean, there's different pieces that lend credibility. Recently, I probably don't have any examples, but when I was an English teacher, it was the same thing. Whether a tool was digital, person, paper book, they had to know whether or not it was accurate, and so it has everything to do with author bias, social economic bias, cultural bias, to how it's presented. We trust things when they're prettier. It's true. When they're 6-foot-tall displays, we're like, yep, that's probably accurate. And so, we have to. I think that's always been something kids have had to learn. I mean, I had to learn that when I used paper books, and I think I trusted paper more just because I did, and now there's a lot of evidence that you can update digital faster, and so that might be more accurate. Now we've got a bigger view of the world. We're more global, so now we've got different cultural biases we're exploring. So I think that's always going to be an issue, and it's just more relevant now because our world has expanded and we have more access to more resources than we did before.
Just to piggyback on that, I would say that the students. So there's the reading on paper, and then reading digital, and we bring in the hands-on experience, which kind of abstractly, I actually think of that as reading. It's just not with words. And so for the hand crank generators is a perfect example of this. So they can read in a textbook. You turn this hand crank, and then there's coils inside this magnet, and then it creates a current, and blah, blah, blah. And we actually have diagrams on the side of the table that walk them through that process with little call-out bubbles and arrows to the parts of the generator. The generators are sitting right there, and we encourage the students to identify the working parts and write a short description of in their own words, how is this creating energy, but they're asked to interact with the generators. And the kids will sit there, and they will turn those hand cranks over and over and slow it down, and they will look inside and go, I don't see any electricity. They will actually question, is this really doing anything? But then there's a needle moving on the voltmeter indicating that something's happening. And so it's really interesting to watch them with no words, with no text in front of them, kind of figure out, when I turn this hand crank, something is happening, but I can't see it. When I talk to little kids, I call it the invisible magic of electricity. And they get a huge kick out of it. And so I think that having that hands-on aspect gives the concept of electricity that they've read on paper, it gives them that credibility that they weren't able to get in the classroom before when they were just asked to read about it or draw maybe a picture or two, or I guess you kind of see what I'm saying. And I guess then they also get to do activities where they might like take a battery and wires and a light bulb, but the fact that we back up from the battery and the wires and the light bulb to the creation of electricity kind of gives them the ability to build that knowledge and to say, okay, this lady knows what she's talking about. I guess they actually do make electricity somewhere, and it does travel down these wires. And then they get the experience that if they turn the hand cranks with no wires connected, the houses don't light up. And I say, well, that's just like if someone cut down all the power lines. You know, they'd have all these towers, but there's no electricity flowing. So they build that belief. They're like, oh, this is really how it works, instead of just trusting that it's, you know, some person said it, my teacher said it was so, or this lady said it was so. I actually did it.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump on that. I love that way of looking at resources. I mean, it's not just things you read, it's things you hear, things you see, things you experience. And one of the interesting shifts to me is how, and I don't know if anybody remembers this, but people used to get into arguments about completely arbitrary facts, and whoever argued the best would win. Like, I just remember sitting around dinner tables and be like, no, you're wrong. And now everyone's like, I'm just going to Google it. And it just kills the buzz. So I think even that rank order of how we rate resources, it used to be, it used to be a little bit more, you know, what we read was more important, and now it's what we experience and maybe above that.
And so the best parts of what we do in Smart Grid are student experience that cannot be denied. It's that no student leaves Smart Grid thinking that, oh, I just took a hallucinogenic drug and I had this weird dream. That's not what Smart Grid is about. Or Smart Grid for schools is not about that. Whereas lots of other things could be hallucinations. Or just somebody made a webpage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can. So.
I think that's really helpful. It's not just about STEM education or how we incorporate digital media into curricula for young people, because part of our job at ISEIF is to educate adult consumers too, and there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information that doesn't happen to be true about smart grid, smart meters, and then there's, you know, there are concerns that are reasonable, there are concerns that are factually unreasonable, and so, you know, how anybody sorts through that hierarchy, I think, is an area of concern for us as we look at all the education programs that we're funding. So I want to thank you again, all our guests, Krista Moroder from Digital Promise, Willie Hunter, and Lindsay Longstreth from Illinois University. Once again, I'm Claire Butterfield, the Program Director at the Illinois Science and Energy Innovation Foundation. Stay tuned for our next conversation on July 21st. And don't forget to check out our website, which is ISEIF.org, for links to prior hangouts. Follow us on Twitter, and you can find all the information in the description below. Until next time, thanks all three of you.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.